Good evening, everyone. How are you? How are you, Mark?
I'm really good, thank you, Zena. I've been jet-setting this week all around the world, albeit virtually. How about yourself? How's your week been?
I've had a really, really good week. It's been busy, but fabulous. I'm enjoying my life, enjoying work. I just want to welcome everyone to this week's UK Edu Stories. This week, we're talking about how's your week been? And we've got some fantastic guests for you this evening. Sharifa Lee, Emmanuel Awoyelu, and Kelly Forrest Mackay. And we're hoping to ask them some fabulous questions where they're going to be sharing what they've been getting up to, how things have been for them, and what's coming in the weeks ahead. So without further ado, let's welcome our guests, please, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to Kelly. Congratulations and welcome to the show, Kelly. Welcome, Sharifa, and welcome, Manny, as well. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show this evening. If you're watching us live in the audience, whether you're on Periscope or you're on YouTube, please do send your comments through into the live chat. And if you've got any questions for our guests as well, we're always very keen for this to be an interactive experience. So if you've got any questions based upon the experiences and settings of our guests this evening as well, then please do ping those through. But even if it's just a little hello, how are you? And a check-in with us. It's always lovely to know that we're not talking into the void. So please do make use of those tools to join us with what we're doing this evening. So Zena, over to you with the first question, if that's
Thanks,
okay.
Mark. Okay, I'm going to start off with Manny. If we start off with Manny, Sharifa, and then Kelly. Can you just introduce yourselves to the audience and explain your role and the context that you work in? Manny.
Hi, thank you guys. So my name's Emmanuel Awoyelu. I'm a primary school teacher. I'm also a Senko for an all-through school in a specialist school for children with social, emotional, and mental health issues. I also don't know how to stay in my house, so I'm a school governor for a primary school in Newham, and I'm also a director of a charity program called the Reach Out Project. So yeah.
Oh, fabulous. And I know that Bookie also works in a special school. And honestly, that the love that you have for what you do, the passion you have for the children that you work with, I've heard you talk before, and I'm an absolute awe of you. Thank you.
Zena,
Thanks, Emmanuel. Sharifa.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me here this evening. I am an acting head teacher of a primary school, and I became an acting head in September. Amazingly enough, right in the middle of a pandemic as well. So it's been very, very interesting. Exciting, scary, roller coaster ride, but it's been good, and I am just so excited because of course Monday we welcome back all our children to school, and I think the time is right. Whatever we feel and think about the 8th of March, the one thing that we are looking forward to is the children coming back. And I forgot to say happy World Book Day, everyone. I mean,
yeah.
what a fabulous day today, in a sense, because we did most things virtually today, and seeing our children dress up. The theme for our school is being you, finding yourself in books. So finding characters that you identify with, and oh my goodness, it has been an amazing day today. So I'm glad I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Sharifa.
Kelly.
Hello everyone and good evening to you. My name's Kelly Forrest Mackay. I'm an acting head teacher as well over the last year, and I'm based in South Wales at the moment. So our context and our expectations for back to school have been slightly different in that our foundation phase children are back at the moment. And it's been absolutely delightful to have the children back in, into school. So, like I said, I understand the challenges, to be an acting head in COVID times is extremely difficult, but we've managed it, and we've like Sharifa has successfully managed to get through it. And as part of my background, I'm an ALNCO as well, and a wellbeing and inclusion lead. But I've also been involved with the curriculum reforms over the last 4 years, and I've been heavily involved in writing the new curriculum as one of the pioneers there. So, exciting times in education and trying to keep that forward-thinking lens in amongst the emergency contingency planning. So lovely to be here.
Yeah, I have to say the Welsh curriculum really interests me, and what you're doing is fantastic. Sorry, Mark, I think I interrupted you there. You were about to say something.
No, All good. And it's interesting, actually, you know, I could ask questions of Kelly for a long time about the Donaldson report and the impacts of that on the curriculum in Wales. If we get time later, it'd be interesting actually sort of dig deeper into that a little bit, if that's okay. But I wanted to sort of start with the first sort of question with a bit of a checkup, really, asking how your week has been. I say you've got some things in your setting right now, Kelly, where your foundation stage are there, but you're looking to prepare to get older students in. As Sharifa said, next week's a big week, as I'm sure it is for yourself as well, Manny. Jumping into yourself first, Sharifa, how's your week been in getting ready for next week?
Yeah, I think it's reflected how all our weeks have been. Slightly of a roller coaster, really. We started Monday we had to close a bubble. We're still closing bubbles even now, and it's the impact of that as well. Key worker children are in, of course, and it's been fabulous having them in. But I think it's been difficult not only for the staff in school, because I think people are weary now of the remote learning. I mean, I walk around and say, can we just get the children back in, please? We need to see them and respond to their needs. Just reflecting as well and asking parents and pupils, they've had enough. They all just want to come back. Parents, of course, you know, in terms of, they are not teachers as how we are. They are primary carers at home, and we've asked so much of most of them as well, and they have been amazing. Can I just say, if there are any educated parents out there listening in, you have been marvelous in what you've been trying to do. And I think this week it's that excitement for me, but also a sense of trepidation. So every single day as we're planning ahead, we're trying to preempt, we're trying to predict, we're trying to make it easy for everyone. So it's been you know, the sense that there is a sense of impending joy, but also that little bit of uncertainty and fear as well. But I think that's reflected in a lot of us, especially in England, as we wait for the 8th. And my daughter is actually a teaching assistant at a secondary school. So, of course, this week is the planning for the big return for secondary as well. And today I think they had several year groups in to get the testing. And this evening over dinner, she's just been reflecting how, you know, how crazy it was. What a crazy day it was today. I can't find any other words to explain exactly how, you know, what she said and describe what she said. So yeah, up and down, but we'll get there. We'll be fine. Can't wait for the children to come back.
No, I see that myself. I've got 2 children of my own. My eldest, he's in year 7, so he went in for his lateral flow test today. And the trepidation, you know, around things like that, and, you know, going back to school on Monday and all these different things. You know, children have had to deal with so much during the pandemic, haven't they? And the various lockdowns and bubbles closing things and left and right. And I think lots of people, teachers, you know, adults and children alike, are looking forward to trying to get a bit more sort of consistency, rather than sort of things changing so quickly as they often do in the situations we find ourselves in. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Sharifa. How about yourself, Manny? How are things going with you this week?
Yeah, it's all right. I think I'm in a different situation from probably everyone in this group, in that because I work in a specialist school, we've technically been open the whole time. We haven't closed, and all our children, they all have educational healthcare plans, and you know, they were all deemed as vulnerable. And so I think maybe from between March till about June, July, maybe we had about 50-60% of our children in. But I think since September, we've had probably 80-90% of our students coming in. So weirdly for me, next week is no different from how the last couple of weeks have been. I think there'll just be more traffic on the road on my way to work, so I'll have to leave earlier because I'm trying to get into work as well. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of the fortunate ones in that I haven't had to do the remote learning that many, you know, practitioners have had to do. And I think it would have been very difficult to try and teach and engage our young people with their learning difficulties, with their needs. Trying to do that online would have been very difficult. I had to do it for a week, and by Thursday that week, I was like, I need to be back into school. So I'm quite fortunate that I can kind of, you know, do what, you know, we're paid to do, which is to teach young people, to support them, and I can do so without the restrictions that I think many of my fellow colleagues have had to work under. So I am fortunate, and I'm not going to use this space to complain. Whatever issues have come up as a result of COVID, one of them isn't having to work from home. I can actually be in the classroom with my children, with my colleagues, and do what I love to do. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've heard lots of perspectives, and sort of given the parallel from Bookie, one of the things that she shared today on that panel I mentioned earlier, but in previous episodes of UK Edu Stories as well, and I've seen this myself too. A lot of the children that you work with in your specialist setting, obviously every child has a diverse range of needs, but some children have really actually thrived in the remote learning setting. Sometimes some children find it really difficult to sort of put their hand up or to engage in a classroom setting and all those sort of things. So it's interesting that you've still found it to be really, really useful to sort of still be in school, compared to, say, some settings where they've actually found for some children in similar settings to where you are, actually being online has actually allowed some of their students to really flourish when they might not have otherwise done in a sort of more sort of presential in-school setting. Yeah. That's really interesting perspective, though, Manny. Thank you very much for sharing. I hope your journey into work isn't that much longer now with the increased traffic. Might have to get a car share going on or bike to work, perhaps. I don't know. He says not being an active biker to work myself. How about yourself, Kelly? How's your week been?
Yeah, do you know what? Obviously, our children are back in school at the moment, but I will say it's been a real week of celebration this week, celebration of team achievements and a real celebration of sort of community partnerships, because during this time, our children have been engaging with distance learning, but we've been able to form some really strong community partnerships in the local institute that's adjoined to the school, and they've been preparing physical packs for our foundation phase children so they can move towards that hands-on concrete learning as opposed to abstract learning, and that's carefully tailored towards our our curriculum offer, which is well-being, first and foremost, is our preparation for learning to support them. So we've, as a community, we've achieved the Investors in Families Award, which has been fantastic. But what's been wonderful about that, and taking a celebration point from the COVID situation, is how the community is pulled together, how the team is pulled together, the kindness of donations around, IT equipment and different things like that. So despite the fact, as Sharifa says, it has been an absolute roller coaster. There's been peaks and troughs, but this week, is that celebration of all of those components coming together, and just like I said, collectively having a chance to sort of have that recognition through external validation. But as a team, we know it as well. So it's been a lovely week, and nothing better than seeing little ones back in the classroom and connecting, collaborating, engaging, playing, learning through play, and just embracing meeting with their teachers, which is an extended part of our children's families, isn't it? So they've got that consistent adult and those those people in their lives that they've missed. So fantastic week. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. That's so lovely to hear. Thank you so much, Kelly. Zena, over to you for the next question.
Thanks, Mark. So we've had lots going on, whether you've been in school or not in school, but what has kept you going this time round? Manny, if I can come to you first, what's kept you going? And I know you're a very, very busy man because you do all sorts of things. You're a governor and you do your own podcast with a group of friends, which is fantastic. But what keeps you going?
Honestly, I think again, being able to kind of go into work and do things how I'd like to do it. I'm quite spoiled in that sense. I've got my classroom. I can teach them. We can go outside. We can, even if we're not able to go on trips and stuff, but I can kind of do the whole outside learning type of thing. So I think just really being able to be myself and do what I love doing, even though everyone else has kind of had quite a difficult year, I've been quite blessed and fortunate that I can see my children every single day and teach the way that I would like to teach. So I think that's kept me going. I mean, I would have done it regardless if I had to, teach from home. But I also think that because of the nature of the needs of the children that I work with, some of them are so complex that I think it's also a reminder that we're more than teachers. We're also, in some cases, we're mentors, counselors, therapists, parents. I'm a second dad to many of my children. Like, they just forget that, they forget that your role as a teacher, it comes with so much more responsibilities. And I'm quite honored and quite, privileged to be in a position that I'm in to kind of have a level of influence over young people. And so I think that kind of motivates me every single day, just knowing that I'm making a difference regardless of whether I'm at home or in school. But yeah, so I think that for me is the biggest thing, just knowing that I'm making a difference as a teacher, as an educator, as all of us are. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And I think I feel that way about the children that I teach, or the children that I come into contact with every single day. It's about those relationships, those positive, those meaningful relationships where you have that unconditional positive regard for our children, where, you know, and I often say to them, you know, I talk to you the way I talk to my own children, I treat you the way I treat my own children, and I say, you know, and I love you like my own children. I go, oh miss, you know, give up with the love stuff, yeah. But it's so wonderful, and it's so, you know, your passion for what you do absolutely shines through. And I think, you know, the children in your class are definitely just the luckiest children in that school to have you as their teacher.
Thank you, Zena.
Thank you.
Isn't it one of the loveliest things as well, though? I mean, with show of hands, who's ever had a child they've taught call them dad or mum? I think it's one of the loveliest things when they get it wrong, and they get all embarrassed. But it's such a lovely thing when that happens, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Sorry, I interrupted you there. I wanted to sorry.
It happened to me yesterday, so that's why I was giggling. Mum, miss, forget it. So. No, absolutely. Thank you. Sharifa.
Isn't that absolutely lovely? Yes, we've all been mums, dads, and whatever it is, and it is fabulous. But how do I follow Manny? Manny, can I just say the passion comes through, and I think what you've described is how I feel as well, and hopefully how we all feel. It's a calling, isn't it? It's something in your gut. You know, you do it because you love it, and you know you're doing the right thing. And it's about doing the right thing and doing right by the children you serve and the families that come along with them as well. I think what has sustained me this far, first and foremost, is my family, because talked about what a journey and what a roller coaster ride, and, you know, having to step up, being an acting head in the middle of all this madness as well, and having my family supporting me and telling me that I am okay, that they will be there for me, has really sustained me. But I think it's that collaboration with the community as well. We've worked really hard over the last year to work with our families, and it's like what Kelly says, we're not investors in families yet, and what a lovely, you know, something lovely to be acknowledged to be that as well. But what I started over lockdown is virtual cafes, and I think by connecting with our families, it's understanding that we are being faced with a common experience. Even though I may be an educator, I may be a leader, and you are parents who are working from home, who have either one child or 4 children, the experience is common. We're being faced with something none of us have ever faced before, and it's about, you know, giving each other hope. And that really has sustained me, because I can see hope everywhere around me, even on the darkest days. You know, that you know, the face of a child virtually, or just imagining them back in school again, or just listening in to acts of kindness all around me, you know. And I think that has sustained me, that not only can we get through this, we can form a better world for all of us as well. There's an opportunity here, and I think we all need to work together and grab it. And the last couple of days, and I know yesterday I was at a presentation with some grassroots movements as well, you know, and there were organizations like Women Ed and Bayman, and they were all saying the same things. It's like all our collective voices must come together now, because we need to understand, number one, the challenges that we are faced immediately, which is a pandemic, but the challenges that will be in the future as well. And we all need to work together. And because everyone is almost saying the same thing in slightly different ways, and perhaps in within their own organizations and their own lenses, but actually we have a common purpose. And I think that has sustained me, that I am part of a bigger thing here. All of us are, and it's magic.
Absolutely, it is magic, and that connection with the people around you, the fact that we change needs to happen anyway. And I'm getting on my soapbox, and I promise I won't get on there for too long. Change needs to happen, and if we can't change now, when are we going to be able to do that? When can we make those positive changes that we need to see for a brighter future, a better education system that supports all children to be, to be successful? So you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, Sharifa. Thank you. Kelly?
I'm going to be very vulnerable with this answer, in honesty, because in comparison to the last lockdown, I'm a self-confessed workaholic, okay? You know, up until recently, I'm a reformed workaholic now. But I think that's been really important, is just to take that space and time to remember, you know, you need to refill your cup. You need to make sure that that you are okay, that you're sustained in order to sort of support and help your team. And in honesty, we know in our school we have had a high number of cases amongst staff, but I'm just exceptionally proud of that team ethos and culture, because despite the challenges that staff have been up against, they've pulled together and they've shown dedication and commitment, and their values are really sound in supporting the learners. And just to echo what Sharifa and Manny have said, you know, that the passion that has come through, you want investment from your staff, isn't it? You don't want compliance. You want them to be there for the right reasons, and that's certainly been permeated through all interactions, of recent times. So just to summarise, for me, it's been about self-care, making sure I'm taking that time to rest, even though that's been quite difficult adjustment. So I've managed to purchase a hot tub to help me with that as well, to make sure that I'm, taking that time out. But, and I actually enjoy it. We do it because we love it, but we do need to look after ourselves in this as well, isn't it? And that sets the standard for our teams to make sure that they're engaging in self-care as well. So
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. So a hot tub. Oh, if you didn't live so far away, on the 29th of March, I'll be coming to your hot tub. But that can't happen. Thank you. Bookie's asking a really interesting question, actually. Are there any particular changes to education that any of our guests would like to see after the pandemic? Now, I'm conscious, obviously, Manny is going to have to leave us in a few minutes. So I'd like to ask this question to Manny first, if that's okay.
Can you guys hear me? I'll mute myself. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, can hear you. You're there.
Yeah. It's a very, very good question. See, I have a lot of changes that I think need to happen after the pandemic. So I'm not sure where to tailor the answer, because I think a massive, conversation or buzzword that happens often is the talk about inclusion. But I guess if I'm going to keep it short for myself, focusing on the vulnerable children and the disadvantaged children, I think a lot of work needs to be done with the outside agencies. I think better collaboration needs to happen in terms of just safeguarding vulnerable and young people, children with social, emotional, and mental health needs. But I think there's been a lot of children that we've seen. I mean, everyone's followed the Marcus Rashford case. We've seen the impact of this pandemic, and I think it's really shown some flaws in not just the education system, but how things are done, in the country at the moment. And I think for myself, I've had to make decisions around bringing in children just because I needed to guarantee that they were going to have breakfast or have lunch. And so, although I might not necessarily have the solutions to it, I think it's already been highlighted that there is something that needs to be done in terms of supporting those vulnerable families, vulnerable children. And I think parental engagement moving forward is key, because I think we've noticed as well now that a lot of families don't have the basic tools in terms of physical resources to be able to help and support their children further at home. But then also, to not have food for a week, not even just through my school or even through the school that I govern in, but even through my charity, we've done a lot of work in having to provide families with the basics in terms of stationery, in terms of food, shopping for a week or two. So I think really looking at some of our most vulnerable children and families is a real focus, not just for us as educators, but I think it's something that the country's leaders need to kind of really go back into, because many children have been left behind. Academically, yes, but I think also we've seen that many children have suffered, and many families have suffered as a result of the last year. And I think it's down to us as a community of educators, but also as a wider community, to kind of think about how can we stop this gap from widening and stopping that situation from happening again. So yeah.
And like you said in previous times, it takes a community to raise a child. And so, you know, looking after our communities, they'll look after our children, and it's all part of us working together, isn't it, to do what's right. Thank you so much for that, Manny. Would any of our other guests like to answer that as well?
Could I add something to that at the moment, please? Yeah. I'm obviously in a really privileged position in Wales at the moment because we're going through a curriculum transformation. The new orders are due to be statutory in 2025. But of course, because of my involvement with curriculum reform, we've had, again, I'll say the privilege of working towards the new curriculum over the last 4 years. So basically, what I feel is the transition for us at the moment is that we are no longer tailoring towards the hidden part of the curriculum. The things that we know are right for our children based on their needs and their context, and you know, the things that we know are central within our curriculum now. So, for example, health and wellbeing now is 1/6 of the part of the new statutory orders that will come in to being in the new curriculum. Looking at how children respond to their life experiences and how that has an impact on their health and wellbeing, which would have previously been within our PSE hidden part of the curriculum that we addressed, because that's what the needs were that were presented. So this is why I'm so enthused and excited about what's going on in Wales with this process model and how we're moving towards competencies. We're looking at what our learners, what we want them to be, not what we want them to know and do. Okay, so it's a real, you know, like for me, it's exciting, it's transformational, it's tying all of those threads together, including the assessment and progression that's going to evolve in accordance with that. So we're moving away from benchmarking and more towards value-added learning, etc. So I'm going to stop now because I can feel myself getting overexcited. But it's just to say that, you know, I genuinely mean this. I feel in a really privileged position that, you know, the content and the opportunities that learners are going to be afforded to because of this change is, you know, and I'd encourage anyone, you know, to, if they wanted to find out more, I'd be more than happy to talk about it. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. Before I move over to Mark to ask the next question, I'm going to say thank you so much, Emmanuel, for coming and joining us this evening. I know you have to go. It's been wonderful to have your voice on the show this evening, and hopefully you'll come back and talk to us a bit more about how things have been going with your charity and with school. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me, and best of luck with the rest of the evening. Looking forward to tuning in later on.
Good luck, Manny.
Thank you.
Bye.
Is it okay if I just jump in? Because it's what Kelly said, which is so exciting, isn't it? And the thing is, I think we can learn so much from that in England as well. However, there are other things, there are other issues. I just want to pick up what Manny said, you know, because he talked about inclusion and the disadvantage and you know, perhaps pupils who are not, you know, who don't have the basics really. And schools have been meeting those needs. I mean, poverty was not caused by the pandemic. There was poverty well before. It's just made it worse, and it's highlighted the fact that we are going down a route we need to check in now and stop. But it shouldn't be schools that are reacting to this. It shouldn't be schools that have all the short-term answers. These are all sticking plasters, and we know what will happen with sticking plasters. You know, you take them off, the wound is still there. It will fester. It'll become worse. It might even turn septic. And I think to answer Bookie's question as well, it needs a long-term vision. It needs a national understanding, a national plan that is not only reactive, but it's responding. And also think about, you know, in terms of poverty and in terms of disadvantaged pupils in a myriad of different ways. It is systemic. It's so much deeper than just giving them a good education. The curriculum is key. Completely agree with Kelly. And I think we need to release schools and you know, perhaps schools within a region as well in the local context in adapting the curriculum to suit the needs of the children and the communities they serve. Yes, we have a national standard, got a national curriculum, but being able to adapt it, academies can adapt it, and I think schools should be able to do that as well. But again, that is only one thread. Like Kelly said, there's so many others, but it must be that national landscape. I mean, it breaks my heart to hear that children, forget about devices, that children come to school or don't come to school without breakfast in the morning. We are so privileged, you know, with our jobs and as educators, and yet we are surrounded by this poverty. We're supposed to be a first world country. What is happening here? What are we doing? So yes, education is key, but that is a long-term solution. It must be a long-term vision, and there must be this national thought. You know, I don't see it, and you know, perhaps some others do, but I don't see it yet. But we need to work collectively together to address these issues. Sorry, soapbox. I'm a bit like Zena. Stop me! I can't stop.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, Mark will tell you when I do get on my soapbox, I really do. But you raised some really good points, and we seem to have come totally off topic. Thanks for that, Bookie, asking that question. We've totally gone there, but I do feel that similar to you in that whether or not we see that change happening, I'm not too sure. I remain hopeful. Let's remain hopeful, because without hope, where would we be? Mark, over to you for the next question.
Thank you, Zena. Next question I want to ask, and say I'm going to jump off piste a little bit. It's still on the list of questions, so don't worry, I'm not going to sort of go outside your comfort zone or anything like that. And if you are watching, as Bookie has done with her question, please do send through your questions for our guests into the live chat. But I wanted to ask a question about how you're sort of going to managing the switch from doing things remotely or hybrid. So you've got some remote, some in schools, some here and there. How are you going to how are you looking to manage the switch from having some bits online to everything sort of being in school in the future? How are you looking to do that? And I'll ask you that first, please, Sharifa, if I can.
Yes, I think it will have to be the blended approach. And I think next week will be key for the children that do come back to school as well. What I have asked of my staff, and they all completely agree, is our approach needs to be thinking about the children's mental health and well-being first, you know, and so we will be observing, assessing, building those relationships, really understanding all their unique experiences, because some may have had luxury of you know, having devices and parents who could support them, and others may not, and all those experiences are going to come to us on Monday morning throughout the week and finding out as well. Like I said, we have had a bubble closure, so there will still be, unfortunately, and bless their cotton socks, children who will not be in school on Monday because they will be self-isolating as well. So we need to carry on with that blended approach. So for those children, they will still be accessing remote learning. I think there's some key lesson points here as well, you know, key learning from what we have done, because we have found out now in the last few weeks that children are screen weary, that they are absolutely exhausted with this. So I think we need to start thinking creatively. Are there other ways of ensuring that they do get the education that they need, but perhaps simplify the blended approach? Because of course, you know, like a lot of schools as well, a lot of us were grasping at straws, really. The teachers it was a steep learning curve for all our teachers in terms of switching from that face-to-face teaching to that remote approach, or even the blended approach as well. And I think along the way we have learned some key lessons about what works, what doesn't work, and we are always doing something for the benefit of our children. It is not just a tick box exercise, and that's the thing. I think that we try and respond rather than react.
Thank you so much for that response, Sharifa. Can I follow up on that a little bit? In a sort of in a what went well, even better if kind of a world, you mentioned, you know, the things that have happened and the things you like to keep and the things you want to get rid of. Could you share perhaps some of the things that haven't worked so well and some of the things that have worked well that you are going to keep? Is that okay?
Yes, of course. I think what's worked really well is our recorded lessons. I mean, we've recorded our lessons. We had, of course, the pressure from parents at the very start. In fact, Boris announced at 8 o'clock that schools were going to be shut. By 9 o'clock, I had several emails of parents asking me, right, So you are going to switch that remote learning, that it is going to be face-to-face virtual learning. And I had to explain our rationale that we don't believe that that is the correct approach, that we will, again, be very considerate of all the children's needs. Now, that's been really good, the recorded lessons. And then we moved on to slightly more live lessons as well, through Google Classrooms and a little bit of Zoom as well. But understanding that it cannot be sustained all day. So thinking very carefully about timing, about children's availability, asking the right questions for parents about when's the best time for your children to come on live, and capturing all that data. So I think, keep on asking those questions and getting the data that we need to provide us with, hopefully future solutions. So that's been good. I'm so sorry, I'm getting quite a bit of feedback, so I can hear myself again. It's very distracting.
If we're not talking, we can just pop our mics off. That would be fantastic. That'll avoid that distraction. Was there anything else you wanted to add there, Sharifa?
No, not for now, but I will jump in if I can think of something else. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much. So moving over to you with the same question then, Kelly. And you mentioned before we went live as well about adopting Lifter in the school. Perhaps you might sort of share about how that's been helpful in sustaining learning.
Absolutely. In honesty, we've been well supported by the regional consortia and the local authority. For example, we've been through a Celebrate, Support and Share and Refine process. So that's been enabling us to reflect and look at our blended and distance learning. But obviously, as well as that, facilitate sessions through blended learning masterclasses where we can share practice across the different schools. So that's been really helpful to Mackay ideas, obviously, from each other. But from our point of view, I would probably, see the strength of the community partnerships, as Sharifa has said, around consultation with parents using Google Forms about, different learning styles. I'm thinking about professional learning. For example, there could be some specific skills that we need to upskill our parents on to support them for homework and different things. So around reading skills and facilitating potentially some asynchronized pre-recorded materials that could be sent home to support the parents at home as well. So there's lots and scope of opportunities for online learning used in the right way, as well as retaining that online learning for in class as well. My teachers have already spoken about using platforms, and this is where Lifter will come in to support teaching and learning in the classroom. So, for example, we've adopted reading eggs and mathletics at the moment to support our cross-curricular skills. And our children, from a needs analysis, have got a very limited perspective on global issues, global competencies. So this is where Lifter, for me, one of the 4 purposes of the emerging new curriculum is around being ethically informed and an ethically informed citizen. And what better way to learn about that than the Lifter platform with authentic learning experiences? So it is seeing somebody else's world through their eyes, their lens, their perspective, breaking down stereotypes as well around genders and how females can be leaders in African communities, etc. That's just one example of some of the lovely rich resources that are available. So yeah, like I said, there's even down to how planning is formed, the way that we formed the planning for blended and distance learning. We would follow that and carry that forward now, because it's about working smarter, not harder for staff as well. So what we've been able to do is formulate an actual formal assessment model through the regional consortia's input, and some of the challenge advisors came to schools and they took part in this pilot project to give constructive advice around provision as well. So it's been a real networking, collaborative effort, again, based on the needs presented of the children, which is unique for us in Wales, that we've got the flexibility and scope to do that at the moment. So exciting, yeah.
It's great. I mean, I've been, as someone who lives in England, same with Wales and Scotland, it's been great to see over the years the development of the hub and the resources that you have available to you, sort of following on from the Donaldson report that I mentioned in our pre-sort of show chat and things, or was it on the chat? I mentioned Donaldson anyway, didn't I? It's lovely to see that, and we've had Sandy Core as a guest on the show a little while ago. If you're not aware of Sandy, her Twitter handle is SandyKA1978. If you want to find out more about her and what she does, but she's a head teacher who's been using Lifter in her school to help move the conversation forward around a more rounded conversation, like you've alluded to there. I think with my England hat on, it'd be great to see more, and Bookie feeds into this as a member of the EdTech strategy group with the Department for Education for England. But it'd be great to see similar setups as we've seen with Glow in Scotland and Hub in Wales as being something we can access here in England as well. Just for those who don't know, I find it amazing that sometimes teachers, don't even know what the Hub is. Could you share what Hub is and how it helps you in your school and what you do, please, for a second, Kelly? And your mic's up a second. There you go, you're back.
Yeah, that's okay. No, so the Hub platform is basically there was a large investment obviously put in by Welsh Government to look at a professional learning platform, a networking platform, and actually the scope of Hub is growing all of the time actually. So you can find resources on there, there's opportunities for collaboration, there's online learning platforms for students, because as we're evolving now with the new curriculum and assessment and progression orders, we're looking more towards a learner profile and looking at how we can use an online platform to collect that experience of the child's learning journey, which could potentially have links for home. So those things that we sometimes miss in school to celebrate our gymnastics, that gymnasts that might be doing some fantastic things outside of school, our budding musicians and artists and things, which all form a collection of something to celebrate for our learners and show their progression. And sometimes that isn't necessarily reflected within what they're actually doing in school because of the shackles of the curriculum, I'm going to say it. So so like I said, this platform is growing. Like I said, it's growing all the time, centered around professional learning, developing the new curriculum. We heavily used it for networking, and there's just an abundance of resources to support every aspect of the curriculum really, and it's and like I said, it's centered around learning and collaboration, for especially around online learning. The platform was ready set for those who didn't want to sort of engage in Google Classrooms, etc. So you've got that scope and that free resource available to schools as well already. So, yeah.
You're on mute, Mark.
That's the saying of 2020, isn't it? 21.
After I said it to you before as well. No, it's a real highlight's the wrong word, but I think it's lovely that Wales and Scotland were really on the front foot in having a national infrastructure to support the sorts of things that we've needed under a pandemic with lockdown. Thank you so much for your response, Kelly. I'm mindful that it's Zena's turn to ask a question, so I'm going to zip off, as it were, and put my mute mic back on mute, and Zena, over to you for the next question. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Mark. I'm actually going to head over to our audience. We've got the wonderful Sarah, who's asked, do you think COVID and home blended remote learning in the right amounts has allowed children to take more ownership of their learning? It's a really interesting question. Sharifa, can I come to you with that?
That is really interesting, isn't it? And I think that is a data that perhaps as a school, of course, we do monitor. And I think we do have that data that, in terms of children's engagement with the blended approach. However, I don't think we've analysed it in depth yet as a school. What a lovely, interesting question. And I think that there has to be that children do have more ownership because, they have the flexibility and ability. What some might not have, maybe the devices or the time to use those devices as well. So there are other variables that we need to think about as well, and not just that, would they have more ownership on the learning? Of course they should. And for some of them, we know they do because we have captured that. Not only have we asked parents, we've asked the children, but we monitor not only how much they use, but how they utilize our blended approach as well. But there are those children, even in our school, and it's a smallish school, a village school, that we know we know everyone in the community as well. There are still children in our community who we know do not have the tools, and not just talking about the internet devices. I'm talking about the support. I'm talking about infrastructure. I love the word that Mark used as well. And that is a national infrastructure, but families are their own mini infrastructures as well, and some of those children don't. So we need to dig a little bit deeper, but I think we'll be able to understand more when they come back and return to us, come back to us, and then we'll identify a little bit more some of those issues perhaps that some children may have had.
Absolutely. And I suppose it becomes quite difficult to kind of gauge where children are, and without having to put that pressure on our young people and our children to be worried. You know, they hear so much in the media about catch up. And I'm secondary setting, and I can tell you that a lot of our young people and our children are genuinely really worried that they have somehow missed out on lots of work. And we have to keep reminding them, actually, you've been attending your online lessons. You've been completing your work. This is, you're not as far behind as you think you are. You've still been receiving education and learning. But in terms of the ownership of their own learning, certainly, we've had to make phone calls to say, you haven't logged in today. Is everything okay? But with my children, I've got 2 children in primary school. What I've really loved about their learning experience when they were in the second lockdown, we're in third one now, aren't we? Is that they were given an option of all these different activities that they could do, and they were responsible for choosing what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. So having that autonomy, I guess, and the ownership of how they were going to learn that particular area was really quite interesting. Thank you, Sharifa. Kelly, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just really briefly, obviously I feel that the way that we're working at the moment has enabled us to be able to work towards the principles of the 4 purposes. In that we're looking at inquiry-based learning at the moment. So obviously within the school now we would devise inquiry-based questions for the children. So that's stimulating their curiosity, isn't it? And through pupils' voice we're able to ask them the type of things that they'd like to learn about. But it's getting that fine balance between what they want to know and what they need to know, isn't it? And making sure that they're carefully sculpted with the right balance of pupils' voice and the skills and competencies that they need as well. So we've done like a fortnightly analysis of engagement primarily at this point, but I think Sharifa is right, is that next steps now is about that more in-depth sort of assessment of how the children feel. I would propose that some of the children have enjoyed the freedom and flexibility and the ability to be able to research things and do things at their own pace and according to their own interests. And I always find it really interesting how younger children seem to have a higher level of curiosity, and then as they move up through the the different year groups, we almost stifle that because of the way the curriculum is prescribed to them and the way they have these certain things that they have to work towards. So it is just really taking it back to those basics. We want to make learning irresistible for our learners. We want to make them interested and motivated and have all of those competencies for metacognitive learning, isn't it? And it's how we can best foster that in them. So again, it's about, it's about that refinement and making sure that we provide those opportunities. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'd like to say, Sarah said, my kids went to school in Wales and the hub gave them great access to things like Microsoft Office, which many children can't afford. And it just sounds fabulous. I think I'm going to have to take a trip to Wales for a few months and see how you guys do things, because
more
honestly,
than welcome when you can. More than welcome.
Yeah, it sounds fabulous. Mark, moving on to you.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned there, Kelly, as well about things around curiosity. When you look at some of the sort of real thought leadership pieces from organisations like the World Economic Forum, in there they're talking about the prerequisites and skills that children will need in the future when they're adults, and it is things around collaboration, creativity, curiosity. And I get it myself. I'm a secondary teacher, and I've known throughout my career, having children myself, I know how curious they are. But when children come to you in year 7, it's almost like they've had it beaten out of them by the curriculum, And I remember seeing memes. There've been a million and one memes about lockdown and remote learning, but there was one meme that sort of really resonates, and I'm thinking of right now. When sort of comparing a remote lesson with a primary school versus a remote lesson in a secondary school. In primary, it's like there's a dog. Here's my cat. Here's my monkey. Look at this cucumber that's broken up. In primary school like that. that, all over it. And then the secondary teachers there on their screen, like, is there anybody there? Please, somebody, just let me know if there's somebody in my classroom. And what we needed was really active, curious learners. I've been involved this week in a 4-day event linked to the Federation for Educational Development, which has been a fantastic reflection. This year marks the 150th year of state education in England. And what the Federation have been doing is trying to sit down and talk with some real thought leaders about a roadmap for education for the future in England. There's been some fantastic conversations in there, but it goes to all the things that yourself, Sharifa, and you, Kelly, have been sharing this evening about keeping it about values. And sure, learning's important, curriculum is important, qualifications are important. These things are important, but that doesn't make up education. The learning that happens on the playground is just as important that happens in the classroom, on the field trip, all the rest of it. So I've loved the responses from both of you this evening, and it massively resonates with me. Thank you ever so much. I want to go back to a similar question that I asked earlier, if I can, and I'll come to you, Kelly, seeing as I've got you full screen at the moment. One of the things I mentioned earlier in the question was about sort of things you'd learned from sort of using technology that you'd like to sort of keep in the future. But removing that sort of that plaster, as it were, from technology, are there any things that you've learned from lockdown that you'd like to continue in the future which aren't to do with technology? So for you, Kelly, first, please.
Yeah, definitely. And it's back to what Zena said about relationships. Obviously because of the bubbling implication that we've had to put in place. Normally, in a normal world, I would probably have some of my TAs to do some interventions and catch-up, releasing the children and sending them to different, bubbles and different groups to do that. But in this climate, there's been consistent key adults in the classroom, and there's been that consistency of the people that know the children really well. So there isn't an issue really with those people being the people that actually deliver their, intervention sessions. And another thing that I've carefully done as well is reframe the language that we actually use. So, for example, rather than catch up, which I know I just said myself there, is progression for all, because every child has a right and to progress, and it doesn't matter which point they're at. Progression for all is the term that we would be using in school. And the other term as well is around the protection phase. So rather than using lockdown, which can be quite a strong language for the children, a protection phase just explains to them it's about keeping them safe, it's about keeping them healthy, and it's just being really careful about that with definitely with community partnerships. There's been such a strength in all of this, and the relationships built with parents and the wider community and the children themselves, that has been an absolute success of this. And like I said, in a village, as was said earlier, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's definitely been reflected through this circumstance for me. So yeah.
That resonates hugely with me as well. I mean, some of the research of John Hattie sometimes, to me, feels a bit like research for common sense, to be honest. But one of the things that he does bang on an awful lot about with the effect size that it has is about the importance and the efficacy of that triangulation of support with the strong relationships you have between home, school and child. So whilst it might seem like research for common sense, it does at least back up the notion that relationships are really important, something we all know deep inside anyway. But great to hear from you on that, Kelly. Thank you so much. How about yourself, Sharifa?
Oh, I think I can just echo and become a little bit of an echo chamber here. I think it is about relationships. I think that's come to a forefront as well. It's about, again, parental engagement. That, we thought it would have been harder, but actually we're more actively working together to enable the children, to make sure that we are collaborating to enable all families and every single child to make that progression that Kelly was talking about as well. I'm almost despising the two words catch up. Who are we catching up with? And we need to just welcome the children for who they are. They are unique. This is not their fault. I mean, that this deficit, language of deficits as well, it's just wrong. It doesn't sit right with me, and I'm sure it doesn't sit right with a lot of people as well. But there are other things as well. We did not have any testing this year or last year. We're still okay. So there are better ways, and we have known that for years, but change is hard. And because, we are in that hamster wheel, we forget to stop, to get off, to reflect and see, is this actually best for our learners and our children? And actually, a lot of things that we have been doing before is not, and we know that. And so how now, to me, this is about opportunities. How now do we change that? Do we change an accountability system that actually it's not working? It hasn't worked. I'm saying that accountability is very important. Of course it is. It is the public that we serve, and it's public money that we're using as well. We have to be fully accountable, but not this way, not the way that we have before, because not only does it place anxiety in the children, and we see that in certain points in year 2 and year 6, is in primary and secondary. Of course, there are certain points in that journey as well where there's just added stress, and you think, but for what? Who benefits from this, you know? And now there's an opportunity to almost take a step back and think about what is really important in our schools as well. And it's something as simple. I'm going to give you an example as well. You know, it is, and it was on Twitter, but we did this from the first lockdown, that on PE days, the children can come in their PE attire. They do not have to change at school. Now, for years and years and years, we spent, this is primary school, and if you serve early years of Key Stage 1, you will know it might take up to 30 minutes to get the children dressed, and then, you know, or undressed and then dressed again. And all that wasted time when actually you can deliver some quality physical exercise and lessons for the children, because we know that physical activity is key. But because of lockdown and because of the measures we had to put in place, the children have to come on those days in their PE clothes. And my goodness, the quality of PE lessons now, because we can have a full dedicated hour of PE. And it's those little simple things that, because we have just been doing the same things over and over again, and it took a pandemic to stop us in our tracks, to reflect a little bit, what are the best solutions within our local context? And that's been an eye-opener. And I think long may it carry on. I do not want to go back to how it was before, you know, perhaps no longer a hamster wheel, but perhaps more of a, I don't know, it's track and field, and you have an aim, you know, more of a marathon and not a sprint. And we keep saying that as well. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sharifa. And you're absolutely right. You know, some of these things are just constructs. Lots of education. I talked about, you know, being 150th year. Education over the years from its inception, education was there to help create a population who could go into a workforce. But, you know, what has changed that much since that 150 years ago, really? You know, how much has changed? You know, not a lot, and probably not enough. So, you know, looking at things differently, it gives us a real, I think, you know, this is a quote I use quite a bit. Plato said that necessity is the mother of innovation. And so we've seen that hugely in the pandemic. And just a simple thing like that about having, you know, just come to school in your PE kit. That means that when you do have your physical exercise, it means you can actually spend that time doing that, doesn't it? Why? And I know it's important for younger children to get a skill. I mean, my 10-year-old still struggles to do his shoelaces, you know. So I know how hard it can be, and it's great that school can provide opportunities for children.
But PE lessons, that's not the aim and purpose of a PE lesson, to tie up your shoelaces, you know. But it was something that you touched on, which I thought was really good about mass education as well. You know, it's been 150 years, but we have an opportunity here to really rethink about the aim and purpose of education. What is it for? You know, and 150 years ago, mass education was to develop that, you know, the work sector, the working sector. But we have to almost widen this perspective again. And I don't know, sometimes, you know, we tend to become quite blinkered, don't we? Instead of actually thinking wider, we just carry on with the model for 150 years. You've just said, goodness me, that's a long time, isn't it?
It is. And another thing which has sort of come out from the conversations, I mean, I knew schools have been around for quite some time. I went to a school which was founded in 1966. 1666. So around for a long time, but say schools were not around until normal state education wasn't around until much longer after that. But I think the pandemic has really given us that opportunity to reflect, and I think the work of the Fed this week is shaping these conversations, bringing in amazing thought leaders like Andreas Schleicher. We had Gavin Williamson open things at the beginning. I mean, in his session, he did mention the catch-up word. I wish they would talk about ketchup rather than catch-up, to be honest.
To make it more interesting, that's for sure.
If he said catch up like 5 times, you know, but like you said, you know, and we've seen it with the positive comment here as well. Who are we catching up with? Actually, you know, like Amy's saying here, she's talking about her son and his work during the lockdown. You know, he's used the opportunity to learn things and build his own PC during lockdown, and goes on to say that now, upon reflection, he wants to have a mixture between online and face-to-face. So why can't we have that autonomy as professionals, and like academies do as well, in actual non-academy schools as well, to have that opportunity to you know, develop things which are right for, you know, supported by state-funded initiatives like Hub or Glow in Scotland, in England, I'm talking about. I'm getting soapboxy myself now, so I'm going to wind my neck in very, very soon. But, you know, out of these circumstances, it provides an opportunity to rethink how we do things and what is the purpose of education, because it's not what it was 150 years ago, that's for sure.
No, I think you're right, Mark. And so many of us become so... we've seen so many amazing and innovative things that our young people and children have been doing during this time. And yet this, I think that my biggest heart thing, my wrenching of my heart is I don't want to go back to normal. I want it to be different, and I want it to change, and I want it to be better. And if we do things differently and think differently, surely it can only be better than what it is now, or what it has been over 150 years. So that's why we do need a plan. We do need to extend and change and develop and be more interesting, diverse, inclusive. There is we could go on for hours. I'm really conscious of time, and I don't know where Kelly went. I suppose her internet might have gone off.
Something must have happened that side, but look, we are on the hour. We do like to try and keep things to time. So with that in mind, with your permission, Zena, I'll wrap things up and just use this opportunity. A huge thanks to Sharifa, to Kelly, to Manny for coming along and sharing their insights on the show this evening. Thank you to everyone in the audience this evening tonight, from Gaurav to Ame to Bookie joining in on the flip side this evening, Sarah Hazel, and everyone else who has taken the time, and apologies if I've missed your name out, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on this week's episode of UK Edu Stories. Sharifa, if you want to follow you, they can follow you on Twitter at SharifaLee4. Please do connect with her. I was saying before we went live, I can't believe we haven't spoken before, given how much we've been connecting on social media for as long as we have. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to, again, like I say, to Kelly and Manny. And thank you to you, Zena, for your work this evening as well. I look forward to seeing you Thursday evening next week, 7 p.m. as each and every week. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, which I think is somewhere down there. So hit the subscribe button and never miss an episode. You can always get yourself in there and set yourself up a little reminder when you go and view our scheduled shows. But for tonight, this is me and Zena and Sharifa saying a massive thank you, and look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Bye.